MandyPowersNorrell is a good friend to Greenwood County. She recently was the South Carolina State Rep for House District 44 in Lexington County, and most famously a candidate for Lieutenant Governor in 2018, and you swung by our part of the state a couple of times during that campaign. I think you also drew statewide attention for the first time, really, when you gave the Democratic response to Nikki Haley's State of the State speech in 2016.
25 years ago, Governor Haley and I were both finishing high school. She was in Bamberg and I was in Lancaster. Per pupil funding at that time was at an all-time high. Our roads and bridges were some of the best in the nation. Our neighbors had jobs with reliable health insurance and stable retirement plans. The future looked bright. What's changed in the past 25 years? I'll tell you one thing that's changed. During that time, Republicans have been in almost total control of state government. They've had the governor's mansion, the House of Representatives, the Senate, our congressional delegation, and Republicans currently control every statewide elected office. Are you proud of our public education system? Are you satisfied with the conditions of our roads and our bridges? Are you confident that if you got sick, you could afford the treatment? In the past 25 years, our state has declined in almost every category. We've been duped.
So I'm thrilled to be able to speak with you today, and thank you for taking the time to visit with us virtually. What part of the state are you in right now?
I'm in Myrtle Beach right now, and I'm from Lancaster, but it's 3 hours away. And
for those that may not be familiar with your background, who only know you from the Lieutenant Governor campaign back in the day, I'm going to give a quick rundown on your history. So please correct me if I get anything wrong. We'll start with college. Furman University in 1995, and then University of South Carolina School of Law in 97. You were a member of the Order of the Coif and the Order of the Wig and Robe. I don't know what those are, but that sounds impressive. I don't have a coif or a wig or a robe.
Oh,
what is that?
Well, I finished second in my class. That's the top 10% in the 2L class and then the 3L class. So
that's awesome.
That's what those are. Thank you.
And prior to your election into the South Carolina House, you were the city attorney for the city of Lancaster, and also the town attorney for Kershaw. But we want to start with the question that's burning throughout Greenwood. Is there any truth to the rumors that you are moving to Lake Greenwood and will run for state house against either McCravy or Stuart Jones? Is that true?
No, that's not even a rumor in Greenwood. But oh my gosh,
it is if I make it one.
Wow.
So
God
that would be cool.
Y'all. God bless y'all.
Well, listen, as we're recording this, today has been an extraordinary day of highs and lows. I woke up this morning and Reverend Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff won their Senate races in Georgia, giving Democrats control of the White House, House and Senate for the first time in many years. Then later this morning, the rumor went around that Merrick Garland was going to be tapped to be the Attorney General. And Congress was finally settling in to certify the presidential election, even with a little bit of drama being inserted by some of our South Carolina congressmen. Yeah. Then at the same time this morning, there was a Trump-led rally that led to a violent mob taking over the Capitol building, pillaging and rampaging inside. And now we hear that there actually has been a fatality during that incident. It's many of us are certainly upset by this, outraged, saddened, even scared. It should give us a sense of urgency to get off the sidelines and be more than just keyboard warriors or meeting attendees and get involved in the political process. So that's why I actually reached out to you before today transpired, was to help inspire people to run for office and challenge those at the local level who, through their actions or inactions, led to the events that we saw today. Now, we could spend hours talking about your legislative priorities and your accomplishments as a representative and all the causes you've championed for, but Today, I'd like to focus just on those who are looking to run for office in 2022. And I'd like to focus on your early years in your political career. Now, not many people may be aware of this. And I'm newer to South Carolina. I was not raised here. You can see by my lack of a Southern accent, I'm not native. But even I was surprised to learn that your political career was not in the state house, but rather you ran for state senate.
Yeah.
And in fact, who was your opponent that year? This was
Mick Mulvaney.
the famous Mick Mulvaney. And he eventually became Donald Trump's chief of staff and then was soon banished to Northern Ireland, right, as a special envoy. That's really interesting. So I want to talk about that. I think it was 2008.
Yes.
And if I looked at my notes correctly, it was a particularly close race.
Yes, and it was not expected to be. But yeah, it was a lot closer than we expected. I had been involved in local political campaigns, helping candidates win county council, city council races. And then, Mulvaney was going to run for, he had just beaten a friend of mine for State House 2 years earlier or a year earlier. And his name is Austin DeVinny. He beat him by 209 votes. And I swear, if Austin had just knocked on a few more doors, we wouldn't have had Mulvaney. And so, but he was particularly nasty, and he did a lot of sort of underhanded things. Like he received a lot of money from voucher pushers in New York, but he wouldn't report he wouldn't report that on his campaign disclosures, and just paid the $100 fine to not report it. And so just nasty things like that. So I thought, well, I will find somebody to run against him, because I don't want him representing me in the state Senate. And I could not find a soul. Nobody would run against him, because he had that reputation for just sort of being nasty. And he let it be known that he was going to spend a lot of money on the race and all that. And it was a Republican district. So I just said, well, he's not going to have a coronation. If nobody will run against him, I'll run against him. And I had that sort of thing that I think a lot of female politicians do, or female politicos, where they say, let me find somebody else to do this, because we feel like we have to know everything about something before we jump in. And it's something that I wish we didn't do, because I think a lot of my colleagues will just say, oh, I know something about that, I'll jump in and try it. And I wish a lot of us on the side of right did that more often than we do.
Because there is a perception that before you run for office, you need to be an expert in all the laws. You need to be an expert in all the processes.
And nobody is.
Right. So you're saying you didn't go through a candidate boot camp?
No.
Or read Politics for Dummies or something like that? What did you do?
Well, I had been a city attorney at that point for a lot of years, and I had a lot more experience in government than Mulvaney did, because he had served in the House for a year. And so people would ask me, they were like, well, why don't you go through city council first? Or why don't you run for school board? That's what they always say to female candidates. Why don't you run for school board? You don't need to be doing this. And I would say, I have more experience in government than Mulvaney does. But you're saying that because he has served for 1 year and I have like 8 years as a city attorney, that he should, you don't question his right to run, but you question mine. And so I just got pretty defiant about it and just said, well, I'm going to run. And, he might beat me, but he's going to know he's been in a fight. And then as we got closer, the message that our campaign had was really resonating with the voters in the district, even though it was gerrymandered for a Republican. And so, and he did win, but he didn't win by a lot. And then 4 years later, when the House member retired, I had won, I think, every precinct in the House district that overlapped with that Senate district. So it was kind of an easy decision to go ahead and run for the House.
Now,
and I'm so glad I did.
Yeah, so
the
were
House
we.
is so much more fun than the Senate.
Is it really?
Oh my gosh, yes. There's scrappy in the House. It's the Senate is very somber, very they call themselves the deliberative body, but it would have been pretty boring to me if I had gone to the Senate instead
Well,
of the
I'm sure
House.
you would have spiced it right up had you made it in there and
Thank you.
injected much needed energy. Um, had you ever entertained running for an office before Mulvaney, or was he truly the inspiration
He
that
really
got you
was.
involved?
I loved politics. I mean, from the time that I was a small child, I loved Jimmy Carter so much. And when I was 7 years old, when I learned to write, I was writing letters to Jimmy Carter, asking him to come to Lancaster and campaign and telling him he could stay in my house. And when I was 10, I read Rosalind Carter's book. There were pictures of me on a little field trip with my fifth grade class.
Um,
It was so
so
awesome.
you
So
made
yeah,
the
I'd always loved
decision.
it, but I hadn't thought about running myself, just
Did you have
helping
a
other people.
campaign team that you built, or was it 90% you and you had a
So
couple of helpers?
So when I finally decided to do it, the Senate caucus had been trying to figure out who they might get, and nobody would do it. So finally, I said that I would do it, and so they brought me in and they said, "You just got to raise money," and I said, "Well, yeah, I don't know how to do that. I'll put in the work." But I don't know how to do that. And so they had somebody come to Lancaster and help me learn how to raise money. And that's always job one for any candidate, is to have the funds to get their message out. So as I was raising money, I was learning from the fundraiser that they sent to me, how to do the other things. And so we were, just messaging and meeting with reporters and doing all those things but job one was raising the money.
Now, did you
And
have a dedicated campaign manager, or was it just the assistant from the Senate
he
caucus that was
he
helping
ended
out?
up becoming my
Oh,
campaign manager. So I sent him an email one night and I said, I feel like I'm asking somebody to go to the prom with me because I'm so nervous to ask you if you will also be my campaign manager. And he always teased me about that and said you were like you were asking for a prom date. But yeah, so he ended up being my campaign manager and we figured it out together.
now, did it feel uncomfortable or awkward at first doing the fundraising or asking people for money? I mean,
That
it looks
that
like
was
you have a
hard.
rather independent streak and would just
Yes.
as soon do everything alone, but running a campaign is not, it's not possible.
You have to ask for help, and so you have to get in the mindset of, you're not asking them to give you money, you're asking them to invest in your shared vision and in your shared goals. And people who are accustomed to donating to campaigns, they know that they want to, if they want to, and so you don't have to put the hard sell on them, and you don't have to feel like you're putting them in an awkward situation. And so once you get past those first few calls, then you realize that what the deal is, and that you're both partnering in a common goal. And so that helps so much when you get past that initial feeling that you're
Right.
asking somebody to do something that's going to be awkward or make them uncomfortable.
Now, I had read that before you had announced you were going to run for Senate, your mother had asked you, why would you get involved in such a quote dirty business? Now, this is what I read from somebody else,
Yes.
and your response was, because we can't leave politics to dirty people. Now, that reminds me of what our former state senator Floyd Nicholson said back in 2018 when I had a chance to interview him, and he said, quote, politics can be dirty, but you don't have to be dirty. It's not a means to advance my own personal agenda. It's about serving the people as best you can. Now, you alluded to this earlier. That campaign against Mulvaney was a brutal one.
It
And this
was.
was your first time running. So did you expect it to be brutal, or were you
Yes,
surprised at
I
how?
did.
Okay.
Yeah, and now both. I expected it to be brutal, but not, I mean, it was brutal at the highest level. It was really, really awful. So, and then after that, I felt like, well, I've been through this. I can go through anything, it's just like, nothing can hurt me now. And so it was a really rough campaign. And, but that was, he had the reputation for being a difficult campaigner. And so that's, yeah, it, It's harder though, I think, on your family than it is on you as a candidate, because the candidate can fight back and the candidate can defend themselves and the candidate can say what the candidate wants to say, but your family members have to kind of, stay back um, and not respond, because you just, you don't want them to fan the flames, and that I think is really, really hard.
It's one thing to get a nasty statement or an unfair comment from your opposition, your opposing candidate. But when you hear it from that person's supporters, people who are complete strangers to you, or maybe even people you know,
or friends,
right,
yeah,
that are now supporting that and saying things about you, how did you avoid internalizing it and taking it personally and letting it wear you down?
So here is the awesome thing about running for office. When you don't run for office, you don't get a referendum on the people in your life. There are people who you encounter every day who are they're nice to you, but they might be people who really can't stand you. If you run for office, you're going to find that out. And you're going to be able to say, okay, that's somebody I don't need to spend my leisure time with. And so my husband told me one day, he was like, nobody else gets a referendum on the people in their lives, and you're just so lucky. A lot of people have to go their whole lives not knowing who their real friends are. But if you run for office, you find that out very, very quickly. And not only do you find out who your fake friends are that you can then, kind of cut out, but you also find out who is awesome, who you maybe only like tangentially knew, or they just played just sort of an associate role in your life. And then you run for office and you find out that they are the most loyal, wonderful people you will ever meet, ever. And then you're able to then bring them closer into your circle. And it's so enriching in terms of just who you have in your life. To run, find that out about the people in your life, and then, cut the people out who are toxic and bring the people in who are wonderful. And I've had a much, I think, better circle of friends and associates than I ever would have had I not
Mandy,
run for office,
that is
because I
so
learned those
true.
things.
And you know what? I don't know that I ever considered that, but when I finally came off the sidelines myself after the 2016 election, and says, yeah, I'm not just going to be a voter, I'm going to be a participant in this game. And never did I imagine 4 years later of all the wonderful people that I've met. Yeah, I've also gotten into a few scraps with some unruly characters, but I don't remember those people. I remember the ones that I fought side by side with, and who were worth my time and effort, and they reciprocated. And you're right, I wouldn't trade that for anything.
It is wonderful. And win or lose, that is a wonderful result of running.
Let's talk about that, because you did lose that race, although it was close. I think you got 46% of the vote. And, again, for a first-time candidate, that's really impressive, especially in a red district against a seasoned person like Mulvaney, who doesn't have any filters or rails on how he behaves. So how did you handle that? I mean, were you crushed on that day? Did you expect to lose and then were just impressed that, wow, I didn't lose by as bad as we thought? What was your feeling?
Kind of that. I did expect to lose going in. I mean, because I knew it was a red district and it was drawn for a Republican. And so, but as we went and the polls were showing good numbers, I thought I might win this. That would be really awesome. Getting so beat up by Mulvaney. He came at me, his supporters came at me so hard. And I did have some people who I thought were dear friends who just came after me, almost as if they thought I would have amnesia after the election. And people I went to church with and that kind of thing. And then they're like super nice again after the election. And I'm like, you think I don't remember this? But that was hard. I remember 4 years later, I was in the Christmas parade and some guy just like walked up to the car and stuck his middle finger up at me, just like right there as I was like, Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas.
Mandy, I used to live in a small city called Binghamton, New York. This is going back 10, 15 years. And there was a St. Patrick's Day parade, and Senator Chuck Schumer was the grand marshal of this parade. And I remember standing on the side, and again, I didn't really know Chuck from anybody else. I wasn't that involved. But all I remember was that he was walking down Main Street and some guy jumped out of the audience and stood right in front and spat in his face. And
And that's
I
the
was
kind
just
of stuff
absolutely
that,
floored by that behavior.
yeah, it is. It's shocking, and it makes me appreciate public servants so much
Yes.
more when, I just see the stuff that they really have to put up with to serve. And so after the election with Mulvaney, I was still kind of just reeling from, being beaten up in my, in my county. And then thinking, this guy spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to tell my neighbors that I'm a horrible person. So that's rough. But they really rallied. And then when I came back and won 4 years later, I think it was so much sweeter because people were like, "Wow, you didn't give up after
Yeah.
you didn't
So,
win in that
I
hard way."
wasn't going to go into your house career too much, but I did want
Mhm.
to say, after you had lost, why did you go back into it again several years later at the house?
Because I had won every one of the precincts that overlapped the Senate. And I
Uh,
figured I'll win this because it was, and that was closer to where my home was too. The Senate, I won Lancaster County easily, but it went into York County, and York County was very, very conservative at that time. So, it was just a much easier
so
race to win.
strategically, that made sense for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, during the Mulvaney campaign, it being your first time through, do you
Yes.
recall any mistakes that you may have made that, you wish you could take
Hmm.
back and maybe improved upon as you then ran for House later?
Yes. So the mistake that I made in the Mulvaney campaign that I wish I could take back is he would attack me. And then I would think, well, nobody's paying attention to this, so I need to ignore the attack rather than talk about it and bring more attention to it. And because that was what I had learned from everybody, from all conventional wisdom, was if you're explaining, you're losing. And when I attacked him, he then went on the attack to say, "Look at her, she's attacking me. I am a victim." And, that kind of thing. So he played that so much better. And he had really good advisors advising him on that. So that taught me that if somebody comes after you in a campaign, don't ignore it. Go ahead and address it and fight back and explain it, and don't assume that people aren't paying attention or that it won't have legs, and especially if they're a well-funded opponent, because
Mandy,
they'll
do you
find
hear
a way.
that? That's the applause of all the members who are watching you say that right now. I can hear the applause right now
Oh
through space
yeah.
and time. Yes, I can. That's fantastic. That's awesome. Absolutely. Um, One of the things people worry about, and I'll even throw myself into that, I've got a career, I've got family responsibilities. How are you able to manage the noise and the draw of the needs of South Carolina against those other important aspects of your life?
Sometimes I felt like I didn't do it well. I'll tell you a story. When I first ran, my kids were little. I think Emma was in kindergarten and Teddy was in like second grade or first grade, third grade, something like that. And so I got a call from a reporter who said, "How are you going to handle your obligations to your husband and your children if you run for office?" Now, Mulvaney's kids were the same age as my son. And so I got really mad and I said, "Would you ask me that if I were a man? Why did you ask me that?" And he said, "No, ma'am, I'm sorry. I wouldn't have asked you that if you were a male politician. I apologize." And then I was like, yeah, I thought so. And then I hung up the phone and then I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do about my obligations to my children and my husband and my family? And because it's a valid question, but it wasn't a valid question from that reporter because he admitted that he only asked me that because I was female. And so, but that's the whole thing. And, we all have obligations to our families, and it is hard to balance the two. One great thing about the House, and I don't know it as much about the Senate, but it was so family friendly in the House. we would have children, like little children, running up and down the aisles in the House chamber. And just members would, if a child was disruptive, a member would pick up another member's child and put them on their laps, and we just didn't care. And, you know, we were just sort of all sort of co-parented for the ones who had little kids. Mine were a lot older by then. But it was a really good just atmosphere.
I mean, some people don't realize that when you're at the state house level, you're not relying on that as an income or as a career. You know, it's practically volunteering with maybe a paid lunch, you know, is what it ends up being at the end of the day.
Exactly.
So that's really neat. You know, I was scrolling through your record of achievements and accomplishments and activities. You know, websites collect all this dossier type info on people.
Yeah.
And one thing that stuck out to me was that you were a Girl Scout troop leader for you know, a few years during the campaigning while running.
Yes.
How do you do that? How can you turn off a campaign and then lead a bunch of Daisy Scouts, you know, with a craft activity?
I was actually I was with them the night before election day, so because it was always a Monday night thing. So I remember that my fellow troop leaders would say, "Why are you here the day before election day all the time?" And I was like, "Because this is what calms me, and I like being with the girls." And they were just, you know, they didn't care anything about the fact that, you know, their leader was a rep or anything like that. So
did anybody question when the troops started having activities like hanging campaign literature on doors and stuffing envelopes?
No, we didn't do that, but we would. I would get them to write letters to women in positions that were not that were traditionally male positions. Like we had a female city administrator and a female police chief and all that. And so they would write letters and tell them, you know, how cool they thought that was, and to thank them for taking on those traditionally male roles.
Yeah. Well, I thank you. You've given a lot of good information. Is there any final advice you may give to a person who's considering running that might tip them over the edge and get them involved?
I would just really, it's so enriching. There's so much. There are a lot of people who, like, you know, my mom said, "Why would you get involved in something so dirty?" And the answer is, we can't leave it to dirty people. And that's something that I really fear, that folks are going to say, this is just not something I want to wade into because I see what's happening. And I just ask you, take that as motivation to wade into it, because we need good people running. And I want to thank the people of Greenwood for giving us Senator Nicholson for so long, and for everything you did to try to bring him back to us this time. He was an amazing colleague to work with, and I love working with Ann Parks too. And I'm so glad that she was reelected. And just thank, you know, these are gifts that y'all give to the state of South Carolina. And as a South Carolinian, I want to thank you for that. Oh. And I really do appreciate y'all.
Do you have any early scoop on what lies next for you and what's coming up in your future that you might be able to share?
I don't. I have all this free time that I didn't anticipate having in 2021.
Look, so I promise, whatever you say here in Greenwood stays in Greenwood. So you don't spill.
I don't know
the beans.
yet. I really don't. But I'm excited to use this free time that I have now to figure some things out.
All right. Well, before we go, I do feel the need to personally apologize to you. So I want to do this very sincerely and in front of everybody else. Earlier last year, you were generous enough to offer your time to help with the campaign of our own Denise Waldrop in a fundraiser. And you allowed people who donated in this event to sketch your profile under Denise's tutelage. And I have had this weighing on my soul, the sketch that I made of you, and I'm going to share it with you right now.
Oh, good.
Oh, I want you to see this. And again, I'm making this public. I'm ashamed of it. So this was my attempt.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know what that is. Apparently it looks like you have the mumps.
You got
And so I feel now unburdened, and I feel like I can now clear my conscience and sleep a little better
That was a
tonight.
fun night. I liked that.
All right. Hey, thank you very much, Mandy. This was an absolute
Thank
delight and
you.
a highlight of our meeting for sure.
Thank you
And we look
so much
forward
for
to seeing
having
you,
me.
and especially as you have told us that you will be running for governor in two
Oh
years.
yeah, did I say
So,
that? Oh my gosh.
hey, the magic of editing and splicing.
That's funny.
All right. Hey, you have a good evening, and thank
Thank
you.
you too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.